Have you ever stopped to think about that piece of paper or metal coin in your pocket? What gives it value? How did we get from trading seashells to tapping a card? Today, we're going on an epic journey through time to uncover the incredible story of money. From ancient markets to the digital age, this is the evolution of currency. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 20 seconds. Imagine a world without money. Thousands of years ago, if you were a farmer with a surplus of grain and you needed a new pair of shoes, you had to find a shoemaker who just so happened to need grain. This is the barter system, a direct exchange of goods and services. It sounds simple, but it was incredibly inefficient. What if the shoemaker didn't want your grain? What if he wanted pottery instead? You'd have to find a potter who wanted grain, trade for a pot, and then go back to the shoemaker. This problem is called the double coincidence of want, and it was a huge obstacle to economic growth. 0 hours, 1 minute, and 5 seconds, societies needed something better. Something that everyone agreed had value. This led to the rise of commodity money. All over the world, different cultures began using specific items as a medium of exchange. In ancient China, it was cowrie shells. In parts of Africa, salt bars were the standard so valuable that the word salary actually comes from the Latin word for salt, salarium. In North America, some indigenous tribes used intricately crafted wampum belts. Even livestock like cattle served as a form of wealth. These items were more convenient than bartering, but they still had problems. They weren't always divisible. They could spoil, and carrying around a herd of cows to buy a new tunic wasn't exactly practical. 0 hours, 2 minutes, and 0 seconds. The real revolution began around 600 BC in a kingdom called Lydia in modern-day Turkey. This is where we see the birth of the world's first coins. The Lydians started using lumps of a naturally occurring gold and silver alloy called electrum. What made these different was that the king Alouettes began stamping them with an official Scylla lion's head. This stamp was a guarantee of the weight and purity of the metal. Suddenly, you didn't have to weigh the metal every time you made a transaction. You could just count the coins. This was a game changer. 0 hours, 2 minutes, and 45 seconds. The idea of standardized, state-guaranteed coinage spread like wildfire. The Greeks and Romans perfected it, creating vast and complex monetary systems. Roman coins, like the denarius, were used across their massive empire, from Britain to Egypt. They weren't just economic tools, they were powerful propaganda. Emperors would mint coins with their own faces on them, a way of projecting their power and authority to the furthest corners of their realm. For the first time, trade became faster, more efficient, and could happen on a much larger scale. An olive oil merchant in Greece could easily sell his goods to a grain trader in Sicily, confident in the value of the coins he received. 0 hours, 3 minutes, and 40 seconds. As empires rose and fell, so did their currencies. But the concept of coinage endured. However, carrying around bags of heavy metal coins still had its drawbacks, especially for long-distance merchants on routes like the Silk Road. This problem set the stage for the next major innovation, paper money. And for that, we turn to China. 0 hours, 4 minutes and 10 seconds during the 10th dynasty in the 7th century. Merchants looking to avoid the danger of carrying heavy strings of coins began leaving them with a trusted agent and receiving a paper receipt. They could then use this receipt to pay for goods elsewhere. These early promissory notes were the ancestor of the banknote. By the 11th century, during the Song dynasty, the government took over this system and began issuing the world's first official, government-backed paper money, known as johazi. Marco Polo was stunned when he visited China centuries later, describing in detail how these pieces of paper were accepted as if they were pure gold. 0 hours, 5 minutes, and 0 seconds. Europe was much slower to adopt paper money. The concept was met with deep skepticism. People were used to money having intrinsic value, the gold or silver it was made from. How could a mere piece of paper be worth anything? It wasn't until the 17th century that the first European banknotes were issued in Sweden. The bank had run out of copper to make heavy plate coins and started issuing credit notes as a temporary solution. The idea gradually caught on, primarily because it was backed by a promise. The promise that you could, at any time, exchange that piece of paper for a fixed amount of precious metal, usually gold or silver. This was the birth of the gold standard. 0 hours, 5 minutes, and 55 seconds. The gold standard dominated the international financial system for the next 2 centuries. It provided stability and predictability. A British pound was worth a certain amount of gold. A US dollar was worth a certain amount of gold, which made international trade relatively straightforward. But it also had its limitations. A country's money supply was tied to its gold reserves. If a country needed to print more money to fund a war or stimulate a struggling economy, it couldn't simply do so without acquiring more gold. 0 hours, 6 minutes, and 35 seconds. The immense financial pressures of World War I and the Great Depression of the 1930s shattered the classical gold standard. Countries needed more economic flexibility than the rigid system allowed. After World War II, the world's leaders met at Bretton Woods to design a new system. The US dollar, itself convertible to gold at a fixed rate, became the world's reserve currency. Other currencies were then pegged to the dollar. 0 hours, 7 minutes, and 10 seconds. But even this system didn't last. By 1971, the economic costs of the Vietnam War and growing inflation led US President Richard Nixon to make a historic announcement. He unilaterally severed the US dollar's link to gold. This act officially ended the Bretton Woods system and plunged the world into a new era of money: fiat currency. Fiat money is currency that a government has declared to be legal tender, but it isn't backed by a physical commodity. Its value comes from the trust and confidence that people have in the government that issues it. Every major currency in the world today, from the US dollar to the euro and the Japanese yen, is a fiat currency. This system gives central banks incredible power to manage the economy by controlling the money supply, adjusting interest rates, and fighting inflation or recession. 0 hours, 8 minutes, and 25 seconds. But the story doesn't end there. Just as paper replaced coins, a new revolution is underway. The rise of computers and the internet has ushered in the age of digital money. Think about it. How often do you actually handle physical cash? Most transactions today are just numbers changing on a screen. When your salary is direct deposited, or when you pay a bill online or tap your credit card, you're using electronic money. It's fast, convenient, and global. 0 hours, 9 minutes, and 0 seconds, and now we're on the cusp of yet another transformation with the emergence of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. These are decentralized digital currencies, secured by cryptography, and not controlled by any single government or bank. They represent a radical rethinking of what money can be: a return to a system without a central authority, but built on cutting-edge technology instead of physical commodities. Whether they will become the money of the future or remain a niche asset is a story that is still being written. 0 hours, 9 minutes, and 40 seconds, from a sack of grain to a string of shells. From a king's stamped silver coin to a government's printed paper, and now to a line of code on a global network. The history of money is the history of human ingenuity and our endless search for better ways to cooperate in trade. It's a story that's far from over. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through time. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the history that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments, what do you think the future of money will look like? Until next time.